For 10,000 years, the Velari Dominion had ruled the stars. Their ships were like silver mountains drifting through the void, vast, perfect, and terrifying. Worlds fell silent at their approach. Entire civilizations surrendered before a single shot was fired. They called their flagship fleet the Eternal Spear, and in all recorded history, not a single Velari warship had ever been destroyed in combat. Their shields were flawless, their energy cannons unmatched, their confidence unshaken. To the Velari, war was no longer a test, it was a ceremony. When they came to conquer, they already knew the ending, and now they had come to Sol, the human system, a small backwater sector on the edge of mapped space. They came not out of fear, but out of boredom. A small species of organic bipeds had begun spreading ships beyond their planet, sending messages, satellites, and explorers where they did not belong. The Dominion Council called it containment. Admiral Korath, commander of the Eternal Spear, called it cleansing. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, Varnock's Pride, looking out through walls of transparent crystal at the blue dot ahead. Earth, a beautiful world, he thought. A pity it would burn. Status report, Korath ordered. His voice was calm, deep, and cold as iron. All vessels in formation, Admiral, replied his lieutenant, a smaller Velari whose eyes glowed faintly under the bridge lights. Shields at full, energy cores charged. We are ready to fire on your command. Korath nodded slowly. Around him the stars shimmered, reflected off the polished armor of the Dominion fleet. 57 capital ships, each one large enough to eclipse a city. To them, humanity was nothing but a shadow, primitive, fragile, insignificant. He raised a hand. Send a warning shot, he said. Let them know their place. Make them kneel. A low hum filled the bridge as the Varnock's Pride's forward cannon charged. A spear of orange light gathered at its tip, glowing brighter and brighter until it tore through the blackness of space. The beam streaked toward the third planet, toward Earth. Korath watched it with satisfaction. A precise strike, he murmured. Destroy a satellite, perhaps, shake their skies. They'll beg for mercy soon enough. But the beam never reached the planet. Something else moved first. At first, it looked like a flicker on the tactical display, a flash of light, too small to be a ship, too fast to track. The sensors tried to follow it, but it was already gone. Then impact. The Velari cruiser Vornak Thal, second in the formation, erupted in an instant of blinding fire. No warning, no energy signature, no shields. One moment it was there, shining, silver and proud, and the next it was broken metal scattering through space. Silence filled the bridge. Every officer froze. The computers recalculated again and again, searching for an explanation that didn't exist. Report, Korath said sharply. What happened? Unknown projectile, Admiral, the lieutenant stammered. No plasma, no energy readings, pure kinetic impact. It bypassed our shields entirely. Korath's hands tightened. Bypassed our shields? He turned toward the display. That's impossible. And then it happened again. Another flash, another cruiser, gone. The bridge shook as fragments of the destroyed ship struck nearby hulls. The fleet's formation broke as panic rippled through their ranks. The Velari had faced supernova storms and plasma wars, but nothing like this, nothing invisible, silent and deadly. Somewhere far below them, from orbit around Earth, humanity had fired again. In a small control room buried deep under the lunar surface, the mag-rail defense system cycled another round. Inside its launch tube rested a solid tungsten slug, the size of a car, wrapped in magnetic coils and waiting for release. When the switch flipped, electromagnetic energy surged through the rails, turning the projectile into a blur of raw velocity. It left the barrel at 30 kilometers per second. No explosion, no energy flash, just pure kinetic destruction. In the command chair sat Colonel Samuel Reed, one of the Earth Defense Network's oldest officers. His hands were steady, but his eyes trembled with awe. Target confirmed, said the system AI. Multiple impacts successful. Reed exhaled slowly. Fire again. The railgun obeyed. Another streak of light flashed through the void. Up above on the Varnock's Pride, alarms screamed. The Velari's perfect formation crumbled as one ship after another fell to invisible fire. Each slug hit with the force of a meteor. Shields meant for plasma beams were useless. Korath slammed his hand against the console. Evasive maneuvers. Deploy countermeasures. Find that weapon. But there was no beam to trace, no engine signature to follow. The humans had built something terrifyingly simple, something the Velari had forgotten could exist. The Admiral stared at the burning wreckage of his fleet, eyes wide. Primitive. Impossible, he whispered. How can metal defeat light? His lieutenant swallowed hard. Admiral, it's not the metal, it's the speed. Korath's mind raced. He had studied countless wars, countless weapons, but nothing like this. The humans were breaking every rule of combat the Velari had ever known. Below, humanity watched the data feed in silence. On every screen, red icons blinked and vanished, each one a destroyed alien ship. Cheers erupted in the control rooms, but the commanders didn't celebrate. They knew this was just the beginning. For the first time in history, Earth had fired upon an alien fleet and won the first strike. Reed turned to his crew. "They'll be back," he said quietly, "and they'll bring more." A young officer swallowed nervously. "Do you think they'll stop?" Reed looked toward the stars. "No," he said, "but now they know we can fight." Back in orbit, the Velari fleet pulled back, its perfect order shattered. Fires burned inside ships that had never known fear. The Admiral stood alone on the bridge, surrounded by smoke and broken pride. He looked once more at the small blue planet ahead, a world that should have fallen easily, a world he had expected to conquer within minutes. Now, that same planet had just rewritten his people's history. Korath's voice was low, almost a whisper. "Who are you, humans?" But there was no answer, only another flash of light from Earth's orbit, and the thunder of another railgun shot slicing through the dark. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Velari Dominion had bled. And across the endless night, the stars trembled. Humanity had spoken with steel and thunder. For years before the Velari ever appeared in the sky, humanity had already known they were not alone. Strange signals, distorted transmissions, and faint patterns from deep space had reached Earth's listening posts. At first, people dismissed them as background noise, but some scientists saw the truth. Something powerful was moving between the stars, mapping the edges of human space. Governments denied it, the public ignored it, but in the shadows, the military began to prepare. The project had many names over the years: Project Thor, Aegis Defense, and finally, the MagRail Initiative. It was built not for invasion, but for survival. Deep under the surface of Mars, hidden inside mountains carved with precision, humans built the first prototype, a weapon that didn't use plasma, lasers, or nuclear fire. It used speed. It used physics. The concept was simple. Take a solid tungsten rod, accelerate it with magnetic force, and launch it at impossible velocity. No shield, no energy barrier, no alien technology could stop it. The first tests shook, the Martian crust tearing through layers of rock and steel. The results were terrifying and beautiful. The world never learned the full truth. They only saw a massive network of power generators and thought it was for energy research. But in secret, Earth's best engineers were building something that could defend their world from gods. When the Velari fleet entered the system, humanity's leaders gathered in silence. No speeches, no news broadcasts, just quiet determination. In an underground control center beneath Geneva, Commander Elena Hayes stood before a wall of holographic screens showing enemy movements. Her hair was grey, her voice steady, and her eyes cold with purpose. "Activate Thor's hammer," she said, and the room fell into motion. Across the solar system, hidden launch platforms powered up. Magnetic rails hummed as energy built to critical levels. Hayes watched the data stream from satellites, tracking the silver giants that had entered Earth's orbit. They were massive, each one a continent of metal, moving like gods through the void. But she knew something the Velari didn't. The universe obeyed one law above all others: physics. And physics didn't care about pride. On the moon, Colonel Samuel Reed's team stood ready. Their platform, designated Mars 3 Rail Battery, had already claimed 2 alien ships in the first encounter. Now they prepared for the next volley. The air was thin, silent. only the hum of energy cutting through the quiet. "Targeting data locked," said the AI. "Wind negligible, firing solution ready." Reed looked through the viewport at the distant Earth, blue and bright against the black sky. He thought of his home, his children, the billions of people watching helplessly below. "Fire," he said. The railgun answered with thunder. Another slug tore through the vacuum at incredible speed. The recoil shook the entire platform, even though it was buried in the lunar crust. The projectile struck another Velari cruiser head-on. There was no explosion, just a sudden flash of light, then silence. The ship's central hull split apart like glass hit by a hammer. Its power core ignited, and the vessel turned into a sphere of fire. On the Varnox Pride, Admiral Korath could only stare at the growing disaster. His ships were falling one after another, and still he could not find the source. Admiral Korath had never felt fear. Not once in his long career had the word even entered his mind. He was Velari, born into command, raised to rule the stars. His fleet had crushed empires, silenced rebellions, and brought entire galaxies under the Dominion's flag. His name alone had made species surrender without a fight. Yet now, as he stood on the trembling bridge of the Varnox Pride, he felt something unfamiliar, a chill crawling through his veins. Around him the command deck was chaos. Sparks flew from broken consoles, officers shouted over one another, and alarms howled in alien tones. The once perfect order of the Velari Navy was gone. Ships burned across the void, their twisted remains drifting silently through the black. The humans had done this. Humans, a race that hadn't even mastered faster-than-light travel a century ago. Korath slammed a clawed hand against the railing. "Increase shield output. Find the origin of those projectiles." His voice carried the fury of a god, but even his officers looked uncertain. "Admiral, the sensors can't track them," one replied. "They have no engine signature, no radiation trail. It's like they appear from nowhere." Korath turned sharply, his golden eyes narrowing. "Nothing appears from nowhere. Everything has a source. Find it." The officer bowed and returned to his console, but the truth was already clear. The Velari fleet was blind. Their sensors were built to detect energy-based attacks, plasma, antimatter, and radiation bursts. They had no system to detect a simple piece of metal moving at unimaginable speed. They had become victims of their own arrogance. The Admiral's mind raced as he watched another of his cruisers explode in silence. The blast scattered fragments across the screen, each piece reflecting the light of nearby stars like falling embers. "How?" he muttered. "How can a primitive world strike with such precision?" The Varnox Pride shuddered as another impact struck nearby. The shields held, but only barely. Power surged through the deck, and several crew members were thrown to the ground. Korath steadied himself and stared at the holographic display. Red icons blinked where his ships used to be. 1/3 of the Eternal Spear fleet was already gone. For the first time in his career, defeat loomed. He could not allow it. "All ships concentrate fire on the planet below," he ordered. "If they hide their weapons there, we will burn the surface to ash." The command spread through the fleet, but the response was slower than usual. Fear had crept into the hearts of his soldiers. They had never faced an enemy that could hit them without being seen. Still, the Velari beams began to fire, brilliant lances of plasma shooting toward Earth and the Moon. The void lit up with streams of burning light. But the humans were ready. From hidden stations on Mars and orbiting platforms near Jupiter, another wave of magnetic slugs launched into space. They didn't glow. They didn't hum. They simply moved, silent, invisible, unstoppable. The railgun rounds tore through the incoming plasma ships before their weapons could fully charge. 2 Velari destroyers vanished, then a third. Their wreckage drifted across the battlefield like shattered silver mirrors. On the bridge, Korath's claws dug into the armrest. "Impossible," he whispered again. He had seen countless forms of warfare, but this was not war. This was slaughter. Yet deep within him something fierce began to stir, a spark of stubborn pride. He was Velari. He would not run, not from humans. "Reform the fleet," he barked. "Bring all remaining ships around me. We hold this position." His officers obeyed without hesitation. Even in defeat, Korath's presence demanded respect. The surviving vessels closed in around the flagship, their shields overlapping to create a single barrier of light. For a moment it seemed to work. The incoming projectiles struck the combined field, scattering harmless sparks into space. Korath's expression hardened. "Good," he said quietly. "Now we fight." The Varnock's Pride opened fire, unleashing a storm of plasma bolts. The energy blasts lit up the void like miniature suns, striking against Earth's orbit. Some hit decoy satellites, others destroyed small defense drones, but the humans had already moved. They were not a static enemy. Their railgun platforms were mobile, hidden within asteroid shadows and planetary orbits. The moment the Valari adjusted, the humans shifted their firing positions. Korath's anger grew with every missed shot. His tactical display showed targets flickering in and out, ghosts haunting the battlefield. "These creatures," he snarled, "they fight like hunters, not soldiers." He respected that in a way, but respect was not enough to save his pride. He needed a victory, something to prove that the Dominion's power still meant something. "Target their command signals," he said. "Disrupt their communication frequencies. I want every human system blind." His officers complied, sending bursts of interference through the system. For a few moments, the human control networks flickered, their signals distorted. It was the first small success the Valari had achieved since the battle began. "There," Korath said, a cruel smile forming. "Even prey can be cornered." But his triumph lasted only seconds. A warning tone echoed through the bridge. "Admiral," cried an officer. "Massive projectile inbound, too fast to intercept." Korath turned just in time to see the main screen flare white. The slug hit the fleet center, cutting through 3 ships in a single pass before slamming into the Varnock's Pride's outer hull. The flagship shook violently. Metal screamed. Sparks erupted from the ceiling. Half the bridge went dark. Korath was thrown to one knee, his ears ringing from the impact. "Report," he shouted. "Damage report. Outer shields failing. Hull breach on deck 7. Power grid unstable," came the reply. The Admiral rose slowly, smoke curling around him. The once mighty bridge of the Varnock's Pride now looked like a dying beast bleeding light and fire. His fleet was gone, his pride shattered, but his spirit remained unbroken. "So," he whispered, staring at the blue planet that had defied him, "you have strength after all. Good, it will make your destruction meaningful." He gave the order to retreat, not out of surrender, but out of survival. The battle was lost, but the war was not over. As the remnants of the Valari fleet limped into the darkness of space, Korath vowed to return with vengeance. Yet somewhere deep inside, he could not shake the image of that single invisible weapon striking with the force of a god. The humans had shown him something terrifying, something he could neither predict nor control. As the stars swallowed his fleet, Korath whispered a final promise into the void. "Enjoy your victory, humans. The Dominion does not forget." But even as he spoke, far below him the railguns of Earth reloaded once more, glowing faintly in the dark, ready to fire again. Far below the chaos of the battle, deep under the surface of Earth, a room filled with light and noise hummed like a living machine. This was the command core, buried beneath layers of steel and stone, a place built for one purpose, to fight gods. Dozens of engineers and soldiers stood before screens, showing the war above. The Valari ships looked like silver giants against the black sky, but the humans had already wounded them, and now they prepared to strike again. At the center of the command deck stood Commander Elena Hayes, the woman who had built the weapon that changed everything. Her hair was silver from years of sleepless nights, her eyes sharp and calm like a blade. She had been called mad when she first proposed the idea of magnetic rail weaponry, told that no human-made coil could ever generate that much power. But now, as the alien fleet burned in orbit, her madness had become humanity's salvation. "Status report," she said, her voice steady. "Rail systems on Luna ready to fire. Mars batteries charging. Orbital stations aligned for synchronized volley," replied an officer. "Good," Hayes said. "Prepare to target the flagship." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The alien admiral's ship was massive, protected by overlapping shields and armor kilometers thick. It was the heart of their command network. Destroying it would break what remained of their will. Hayes leaned forward over the console. "AI, calculate optimal firing sequence." "Working," said a mechanical voice. On the main screen, a digital model of the Valari flagship rotated slowly, glowing red where its shields were weakest. "Solution ready. Probability of kill 93%. Hayes stared at the number. 93, it was enough. "Fire on my mark," she said. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of what came next. The Valari thought themselves invincible, but she knew better. No one, not even gods, could fight forever against physics. Mark. The word was quiet, but it unleashed hell. Across the system, a dozen magnetic rail platforms fired at once. The vacuum filled with invisible death, tungsten slugs racing faster than thought. Each one carried enough kinetic energy to vaporize a mountain. They traveled through the void in perfect silence until they struck. The first hit tore through one of the flagship's escort ships, splitting it in half. The second slammed into the outer hull of the Varnox Pride, bending its armor like paper. The third went straight through the ship's command tower. On board, Admiral Korath barely had time to turn before the world around him exploded in white light. The bridge shattered, metal and bodies torn apart by impossible force. The blast didn't leave a crater. It left nothing. From Earth, Hayes watched the impact feed. The enemy flagship was gone. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She simply lowered her head and whispered, "Target neutralized." Around her, the room erupted in shouts of triumph. Soldiers hugged one another. Engineers cried. For the first time since the aliens had arrived, humanity had destroyed the heart of their fleet. But Hayes knew the battle wasn't over. She raised her hand and the room fell quiet. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "This is not the end. They'll come back. They always do. And next time they'll be ready for us." Her words cut through the celebration like a blade. The officers nodded, their smiles fading into grim focus. "We'll rebuild," she continued. "We'll expand the network. Double the power output. Every moon, every station, every planet gets a rail battery. If they want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget." The AI chimed softly. "Incoming signal from Mars Command," it said. "Patch it through," Hayes replied. The screen flickered, revealing Colonel Reed, his face streaked with sweat and dust. Behind him, the red landscape of Mars burned faintly under distant explosions. "Flagship confirmed destroyed," Reed said. "Valari ships are scattering. They're pulling back toward the outer system." Hayes nodded. "Good work, Colonel. Keep the pressure. Make sure they know we can hit them anywhere." Reed gave a tired smile. "They know, Commander. Trust me, they know." The connection cut, leaving the room in silence once more. Hayes looked up at the tactical map. The stars were full of wreckage, the ghosts of a battle humanity should never have survived. Yet here they were, bruised, burning, but unbroken. She took a slow breath. "Send a message," she said finally. "To everyone, every colony, every outpost. Tell them this: the Valari are not gods. They bleed." The message spread across every communication channel. On the Moon, in orbit, on Mars, in mining stations far beyond Pluto, people stopped to listen. The words echoed through every speaker, every screen, every heart. "They bleed." Those two words lit a fire across humanity's soul. Somewhere above the planet, pieces of the alien flagship still drifted, silent and glowing in the dark. The wreckage was a warning to every empire that might come next. Humanity had built their weapons from steel and courage, and they had done what no one thought possible. They had made the Invincible fall. As the last of the battle data scrolled across the screen, Hayes turned and walked toward the observation deck. Through the thick glass, she saw Earth below, half in sunlight, half in shadow. She rested a hand against the window and whispered, "Rest now, old world. You've earned it." Behind her, the command center dimmed. The railguns powered down, and the stars outside glimmered like silent witnesses. The engineers of war had done their work, but in her heart, Hayes knew this victory was only the beginning. Somewhere far out in the dark, the Valari were regrouping, and when they returned, humanity would be waiting, with railguns ready and hearts made of iron. The battlefield above Earth was a graveyard of fire and metal. Broken Valari ships drifted in silence, their once shining hulls torn apart, their light dimming into darkness. The void that had once been filled with the proud formation of the Dominion fleet now looked like the ruins of a dying empire. Humanity had done what no other species dared to dream. They had turned the tide. In the command center below, Commander Elena Hayes stood before the holographic display, her eyes reflecting the shifting red and blue markers that danced across the map. The Valari fleet, once unstoppable, was scattering, retreating in chaos. "How many left?" she asked. 17 major vessels, maybe less," replied an officer. "But their formation is broken. They're trying to regroup near the asteroid belt." Hayes nodded slowly. "They won't make it that far." She turned toward the railgun control hub. "Tell Mars Command to ready another volley. Let's end this." The order spread across the system like lightning. In orbit around Mars, the massive rail platforms rotated, their magnetic coils glowing with electric light. The hum of energy filled the control bunkers as engineers locked in targets. Colonel Reed stood at the center, headset on, face hard as stone. "Targets confirmed," said his technician. "Firing sequence aligned." Reed raised his hand, his voice calm. "Fire." The gun spoke once more. Invisible death tore across the void, faster than thought, faster than light could chase. The projectiles struck the Volari ships one after another. Each hit was silent, but the destruction was absolute. The alien vessels cracked open like eggshells, their glowing cores spilling into the black. The Dominion fleet, once the pride of 1,000 conquered worlds, was dying under human fire. In the wreckage, a Volari captain screamed into his communicator, demanding orders, begging for direction. But no command came. The flagship was gone. The admiral was dead. The mighty Dominion had no one left to lead them. On board the Varnox Pride's shattered remains, what little of the bridge still existed was open to space. Flames flickered in the vacuum, dancing briefly before dying away. Admiral Korath's final transmission, recorded moments before impact, was already spreading among the surviving ships, a voice of disbelief, confusion, and fury. "They are not what we thought," the message said. "They are not prey." On Earth, the message was intercepted and replayed to the command center. Hayes listened in silence. Her people stood still, hearing the words of their enemy. When the recording ended, she said softly, "No, Admiral. We never were." Then she gave the final order. "All batteries, fire for effect." The sky above Earth turned into a storm of streaking light as railguns across the Moon, Mars, and the orbital platforms unleashed everything they had. Each slug flew through the void with deadly precision, guided by AI targeting systems honed to perfection. The Volari survivors never had a chance. One by one, their ships vanished from the sensors, some exploding, others torn apart silently by the fury of momentum. Within minutes, the once mighty fleet was gone. What remained were fragments, glowing wrecks, and the fading echoes of an empire's arrogance. Humanity had won. In the control room, the lights dimmed as the firing ceased. For a long moment, no one spoke. They simply stared at the stars on the screens, the same stars that had once seemed unreachable. Then a quiet voice broke the silence. "We did it," whispered one of the young engineers. "We actually did it." Hayes nodded, her expression calm but her voice trembling. "Yes," she said, "but remember this, they will come again, and next time they won't underestimate us." Around her, the exhausted crews smiled through tears, half in triumph, half in disbelief. For generations, humanity had looked up at the stars with wonder. Now they had looked back down with fire. Above them, the last fragments of the Volari fleet burned out, their wreckage drifting toward the cold pull of Jupiter's gravity. Somewhere within the debris, a single Volari pod escaped the destruction, its engines weak, its pilot wounded but alive. The transmission it carried would reach the Dominion homeworld within months, and when it did, the news would shake the galaxy. Humanity had stood against the most powerful empire in the known universe and won. The Volari would call it an accident, a fluke of fate, a mistake of arrogance. But deep inside they would know the truth. The universe had changed. Humanity, once ignored and underestimated, had proved themselves a force beyond measure. On Mars, Colonel Reed stood outside the bunker, staring at the red horizon. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the dusty plains. He closed his eyes and listened to the faint hum of cooling machinery. "We're still here," he whispered. The words carried no pride, only quiet strength. Back on Earth, the world celebrated. People filled the streets, waving flags, cheering, crying. But for those who had fought, it was not a victory to boast about. It was survival. Hayes returned to her quarters late that night, exhausted. She sat by the window, looking at the stars, and thought of the lives lost, both human and Volari. "This is only the beginning," she murmured. Somewhere beyond those stars, the Dominion would rebuild and they would come again, stronger, angrier. But this time the humans would be ready. The railguns were silent now, cooling after their storm of fire, but they stood watch across the system, on the Moon, on Mars, even on the icy moons of Jupiter. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not with diplomacy or submission, but with courage, intelligence, and unbreakable will. The turning tide had come and gone, and when history remembered this day, it would not be as the day Earth was invaded. It would be remembered as the day Earth fought back, the day humanity rose, the day the stars themselves learned to fear the sound of thunder. The galaxy had grown quiet after the fall of the Valari fleet. For the first time in ages, their trade routes went dark, their colonies fell silent, and their vassal races whispered in disbelief. The Dominion, once feared as gods of war, had been defeated by a species barely known outside their own solar system. The story spread fast, carried by traders, spies, and broken transmissions. Some said the humans had discovered ancient alien weapons. Others swore they had unleashed forbidden technology. But those who survived the battle knew the truth. It wasn't ancient power. It was human will. In the Valari capital on the shining world of Serath Prime, the High Council gathered in the Hall of Command, a colossal dome of silver and light. Thousands of nobles and admirals stood in silence as the surviving captain, still wounded and trembling, delivered his report. His ship was gone, his crew dead, his eyes hollow. "The humans destroyed us," he said, voice shaking. Their weapons tore through our shields like paper." The chamber erupted in shouts of disbelief. "Impossible!" cried one of the nobles. No primitive world could harm a Valari cruiser. The captain looked up, his face pale and haunted. "Then explain the wreckage," he said. "Explain the Admiral's last words." He activated a small hollow device. The image of Admiral Korath appeared, his last transmission replayed for all to hear. "They are not what we thought. They are not prey." The hall went silent. The words echoed like thunder. Even the High Chancellor of the Dominion, an ancient being who had ruled for centuries, said nothing for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "If this is true," he said slowly, "then we have awoken something dangerous. Something new." Across the galaxy, smaller races, once slaves or subjects of the Valari, heard the news with growing hope. On distant worlds, old resistance groups lit their beacons again. If humans could defeat the Dominion's invincible fleet, maybe freedom was not impossible after all. The story of Earth became a legend overnight. It traveled faster than light, faster than ships, faster than fear itself. "The humans fought back," they whispered. "The humans won." On Earth, humanity was rebuilding. The orbital platforms were being repaired, railgun coils replaced, and debris from the battle still drifted around the Moon. Commander Hayes sat in the Global Defense Chamber, watching a new message being prepared. The holographic display showed the crest of the United Earth Alliance. She leaned forward and said, "Begin transmission." Across thousands of frequencies, the signal pulsed outward, through the asteroid belts, past Neptune, into interstellar space. The message was simple, spoken in calm, clear English. "To any civilization listening beyond the Sol system, this is Commander Elena Hayes of Earth. We are a peaceful people, but we will defend our home. If you come with friendship, you will find allies. If you come with conquest, you will find our guns ready." The words traveled across the stars, through systems both known and forgotten. On distant worlds, strange eyes watched the human broadcast flicker across the sky. Some felt admiration, others fear. On Serath Prime, the Valari Council played the message in silence. When it ended, the Chancellor turned to his generals. "They dare challenge us openly," he said. "They dare send warnings to the Dominion. Shall we retaliate?" asked a commander. The Chancellor hesitated. For the first time in his reign, uncertainty crossed his face. "No," he said finally. "Not yet. We must understand them first." But in the shadows of the council chamber, younger Valari officers clenched their fists, their pride bleeding into rage. They would not forget this insult. They would not forgive it. Meanwhile, on the outer edges of the human defense grid, engineers worked tirelessly to expand their power. The railgun platforms grew larger. New designs were being tested, faster, stronger, smarter. The scientists called them Thunderlance systems, weapons that could strike targets beyond light hours away. Humanity was preparing for what came next. In the dark of space, satellites picked up faint signals. Valari transmissions encrypted and fast. Something was moving out there, regrouping. Hayes watched the readings on her monitor, her expression calm but her mind sharp. "They'll come again," she said quietly. "And when they do, we'll be ready." She looked up at the stars, the same stars that had once seemed untouchable. Now they were within reach. "Send another message," she said. Not to them, to everyone else. Her aide looked puzzled. "What should it say?" Hayes smiled faintly. "Tell them humanity is no longer bound to Earth. Tell them the age of silence is over." The transmission went out again, a new one this time. A message of strength, a message of warning, a message of hope. "This is Earth," it said. "We are awake." And somewhere, far beyond the edge of human reach, alien worlds listened and trembled.